This is going to be a slightly different video than the ones I've been making. Not like too much different. It's all about politics, but I wanted to make a video entitled Why It's Okay to Be a Nazi in Today's Age. First of all, I want to point out that if you ask any normal person, they would say that they do not want to be a Nazi. Any normal person, like anybody, just like would tell you that, no, I don't want to kill people just because they're of a different race and gender and ethnicity than me. But the reason why it's become so pervasive in the past couple of years is because of a sneaky tactic they've been using. Now, if you watch my last video about Politics Explained, I explained the hierarchical structure of how businesses and governments and cliques and gangs and how all these little things work. And I explained about the hierarchical structure of things and how the oldest and greatest groups of their time became the heads of the world, basically. How they run things without having to outright say that they run things. And I talked about who's at the top. I talked about who's at the bottom. Now I want to talk about a particular strategy that the Nazis have adapted, because this strategy is what made it so easy for people nowadays to claim that they're a Nazi and be accepted in society. So the Nazis, after they lost in World War II, after they tried their brutal attempt at just like murdering all their enemies, they came up with a different idea. And it's kind of like the same idea as the Ku Klux Klan or any of those kind of organizations, any of these hate organizations, any of these people who really hate on life. It was a very simple strategy. We won't tell people who we are. We'll keep our people in secret, right? Well, we'll infiltrate all these other groups. Like we'll infiltrate Coca-Cola. We'll infiltrate YouTube. We'll infiltrate all these different things. You know, like there was recently a pedophile scandal on YouTube, right? About how the pedophiles are trying to take over a certain subsection of YouTube. And these other YouTubers reached out to stop it because they didn't agree with it. It's the same concept. When you have ideology that is so toxic that you can't speak it out loud to people because it'll just turn them away from your goal, right? Then you develop new ways of doing things. And instead of it's kind of like the same tactic the CIA uses when they're trying to take down these big terrorist organizations, right? That's a really good example. They'll send in an agent to work for the group that is like committing these felonies and stuff like that. They'll send in an agent, and the agent will rise through the ranks, or multiple agents will rise through the ranks, and they'll slowly but surely take over whatever organization they were trying to do. So, with the Nazis, what they were trying to do is they were trying to take over because they knew that they couldn't beat their enemy. It was made very clear that in World War II that the Nazis were never going to beat the organizations that they were setting out to beat. They came up with a very sneaky tactic, and they started taking over these organizations by placing leaders in place. Like the thing in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Hail Hydra. Like the thing in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They're infiltrating the organization at lower ranks, higher ranks, ranks all around, just in order to get to the top. And when they're at the top, that's like, how would I explain this? When you're the CEO of a company, you know, you have like free reign to basically do whatever you want to do, right? And in my last video, I explained how like gangs and organizations and all these things and governments, they're all like hierarchical structures. And when you're the big head of a big organization, you can basically do whatever you want. Like even in America, this is taking place. Like the Republican plan for 2025 is to take over the US government by putting someone in place who will do the bidding of the Republican Party and basically like gut all the structures in the United States government so that way they can have full reign over whatever they want to do as president. Their plan is to put somebody in as president and then gut all these organizations and put in their own men so that way they can take over the structures of how the world works, basically how the United States government works. And that's the big plan of 2025 of the Republican Party, right? I'm using that as an example. The Nazis did this. The Nazis did this. They took over all these structures and all these things that they can get their little grubby mitts on. And they took over all the highest of the high, like probably even the Republican Party. Like probably even like the organizations I was talking about in my last video, because I don't want to be controversial in this one. I'm trying to make it as the least bit controversial. This is what's been happening. The Nazis have been, they've formed their singular organization and they've been planting people in place so that way they can take over the top of the top ranks, because they understand, apparently Hitler like understood this really well. He understood that these organizations all have their different heads and they're all like subservient to one another. And Hitler's thing was that he wanted to go about it aggressively and try to just oust the top so that way he could be the top, right? That's why he went after the people he went after, is because he was trying to oust the top of the top organizations. And when that didn't work, the Nazis came up with a second plan. Right? They came up with a second plan. And the second plan is so nefarious. It's what I've been talking about. They've been infiltrating all these really, really high up groups so that way they can gain control over their power and sway in the world. They're like, it's like almost like a virus, right? Like a virus-based organization where they're trying to take over the heads of all these organizations in order to come out on top as the leading group and like have their ideology spread all across the world. And we don't want that for obvious reasons, because you know Nazis are fucking Nazis and they're gonna fucking kill anybody who's in their way, right? They're like the most fucking how should I say, they're the most brutal and violent out of any civilization that we've seen to date. So that's why nowadays it's okay to be a Nazi, because they've infiltrated these groups on such high levels that most of the heads of these corporations and companies and things like that are like, they're okay with it because they're down with the same fucking shit, because the Nazis have done such a great job of infiltration that they no longer have to answer to these big groups the same way that little groups have to. They're no longer a little group. They become a big group that's just like spread all of its resources across the entire world. And that's why it's okay to be a Nazi nowadays.